Hello, everyone. Madeline Dale here with the Chapter Goddess. And today I have a great author for you guys. He has a ton of books out and he's fixing to have 3 drop like back to back. So I'm going to let Peter tell us a little bit about himself and his writing, and then we'll dive headfirst into his new books coming out. So take it away, Peter.
Perfect. Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. A little about myself. I am a doctor in English. I work for the University of Maine at Augusta part-time, as well as for the Maine Department of Corrections as a teacher within the prison facilities. So I draw on some of that as I write my books. And I've been only writing for about 7.5 months seriously. Of course, writing my whole life. I'm married. I got 3 girls at home, 6, 11, and 17. Got to get the ages right. So they keep me busy in my downtime. And they're the reason I do a lot of writing on my phone. And besides that, I love to read, love to write, and grew up playing Dungeons and Dragons and science fiction, fantasy, and and I finally pulled the trigger back this last summer to say, let's give it a shot and see if people would be interested in reading my stories, and it's gone well. So I'm excited.
That is awesome. I love that we can now write on our phones because I do a lot of that myself, being a mom and staying busy with my child. Like they're a lifesaver.
Yes, I agree.
Yes. I even do like a lot of planning, just like in the notes app on it, just to kind of get me started. But let's talk about your books coming out, the Agents of Tomorrow series. So where did you get the inspiration for this book series?
Yeah, so this series is maybe the second series that I've written in post-apocalyptic. And this one, I really was playing with the idea of the prison system. And then, of course, with the pandemic we're going through, I'm like, what? I'm going to play a little with the pandemic as well. And my wife had told me not to do it. She's like, it's going to cause controversy. And I said, well, you know what, Shai? Any type of notice is good notice. I'm like, so people may enjoy it. They may not enjoy it. They may think that I'm playing politics, but I'm not. I don't care what people do. I say, take care of yourself, make your own choices. I myself am triple vaccinated, but I'd never force on anybody else. So the story itself kind of revolves around we can't even call him an ex-criminal. It revolves around Joshua Miller, who is a current inmate in the prison system. And through different circumstances, he ends up getting out of prison. Not released, but getting out of prison. And he's trying to fulfill a promise to his cellmate or his neighbor, which was, I'll find your daughter, take care of her. And his daughter's about 8 or 9 years old. So he's like, I'm gonna help you out. I'll find her. I'll take care of her. And we kind of followed along that track of through prison, tracking down this young girl and meeting different people and seeing him really toy with the idea of, am I really going to do this? Mm-hmm. Am I going to keep my word or not? And as you read the book and learn his history, there's some pretty interesting things that happen with him and some encounters that he has. But it shows growth of him. And throughout the series, you'll find out, of course, he does end up finding the young lady. And that's a whole new ball of wax once he has a little girl in his custody, because now it's not only surviving, it's taking care of her as well. And they keep going back to, how he's going to keep his promise. And eventually they find a little puppy named they name him Mike, which was his friend's name. So Mike's back in their life. And their whole goal is to finally get to Guadalajara, of all places, which somehow has become the cradle of life in this outbreak.
Wow.
So we deal with politics with the governments, Mexican government, back and forth. We bring up, I bring up the wall a little bit of how, we will now want to get to Mexico, and they're like, well, you built the wall, how you want to get in? Some fun stuff like that, tongue in cheek. So people that are involved in politics will pick up on that, but it's not a political piece at all. It's supposed to be made just for enjoyment and let people escape from reality for a little while. So
that's awesome. I like that it kind of ties all of that in there because, really, it kind of is thought provoking, and in a fantasy fictional way, it makes you think of like what's going on now. And that's another thing I like about post-apocalyptic stories. It's like sometimes this could actually happen, So, and I take that with a grain of salt if you're listening to this, guys, because it really there's a lot of things that could come out of what's going on in our world right now.
It's like sometimes, we're kind of living pieces of it with this pandemic, what we're going through, and not to get religious on people, but, my parents are very religious, and my mom talks about Revelations and the 7 seals and all that stuff. And sometimes she'll look at me like, Pete, I'm telling you, this is the end. And I'm like, well, thanks, Mom. That makes me feel great. I appreciate that. I'll go write about that next. But it's fun.
That would make a good story, though. Like, for real, there's been a
Yes.
lot of people that have taken it and turned it into good stories. I like that. So, the first book in the series, The Deliverance, is dropping the 18th this month.
The
right?
18th, yes. And it's on sale for 99 cents now through the 18th. And then it'll go up for the ebook version to $3.99 after it releases.
Awesome. So, where did you get the inspiration for Joshua? Like, where did you have somebody you based him off of?
He's a mix of probably 4 or 5 of the residents that I work with here at the correctional center up in Maine. I took some pieces from each of them, some of the good pieces and some of the not so good pieces of guys that I work with, and kind of melded them together and thought, what would a reluctant hero be like? And that's really what he ends up being in the story. He's a reluctant hero. His goal was never to, he thought he was going to be in prison the rest of his life. And he gets thrown into the situation because he makes a promise. And I look at some of the men that I work with here, and piece I try to get through in that characterization of him is working in the prison system has given me a new sense of dealing with people that are incarcerated. Before I worked in the prison system, you say someone was in prison, I'm like, oh my God, they must be evil, they're bad, they're horrible. And being here now, they're here for a reason. They made some poor choices, they made some mistakes, or they've done some horrendous stuff. Don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to gloss over it. But, I work with one gentleman who, honestly, if we were not in the prison system, if he wasn't incarcerated, we'd be friends on the outside. Very smart, intelligent, one-off. He made one mistake and he's here the rest of his life. And, it's scary to think about that. We're all in that situation where we're one decision away, from being on the other side of the wall. So I look at these men and, like I said, some of them, they're like you and I, and don't get me wrong, some of them are definitely not good people. But most of them, it was a choice, it was a mistake, it's an addiction, it's something that caused them to be here. And once they're here, they're working with that. And I tried to embody that into Joshua. I wanted him to kind of have that sense of, I'm more than just an inmate. I'm a person.
Yeah.
So hopefully that comes through as he makes decisions and actions throughout the series.
Yeah. And honestly, on that note, like it's really sad that a lot of people do forget that like incarcerated persons they're people too. Like they're not just like, oh, this person did bad things. Because I volunteer for Poetic Justice, which we do a writing system with incarcerated women. And doing that, I've seen a whole different side to it all. And like, I totally understand what you've said about it. Like it is, there's more to them than just the crime. Like they're people too. They have their passions, they have their family that they love, that they can't see, that they're shut off from. And then the pandemic itself has been even harder on them than it has been us. So, because they're completely cut off, they're stuck, they can't leave their beds or anything when they're on lockdown. And it's just insane. Sorry.
Yes.
I'll get off my soapbox now.
No, that's okay.
That was totally, I enjoy volunteering for the program. So it's actually like being an author and getting to do that. It's like a whole nother
it's eye-opening too and enlightening, and it opens up all kinds of different thoughts down the road of what we can do, even writing for stories and ideas. Talking about creative people, I'd say some of the most creative people I've met have been behind the walls in the prison system.
Oh yeah, definitely. I agree with that. And I'm going to go back to the book talk now. So you have 3 books. Do you plan on creating more for this series?
So this series I have set as a 3-book series by itself, end at 3. Something I like to do with my original series I wrote, which was Earth Has Fallen, the Earth Has Fallen series, which was intended to be only 2 books, ended up being 4 books and a prequel, so 5 total. I like to go back through after I write the series and finish it, let it sit for a little bit, and then do almost like a character study. So like what I'd like to do with this series is go back eventually and look at Joshua and give his story leading up to his imprisonment and what brought him to that situation, and look at a few other characters. So I did that in the other series in Earth Has Fallen. I took Laredo, who was the main character in that series, and actually did a prequel called Laredo, which is his life up until he enters the book. And I find that really appealing to me. And like we were talking off camera earlier, I'm a pantser. I write by the seat of my pants. I have an idea of what I want to do, but I don't write it down. like I said, I have characters that will die in my book, and I'll sit there looking at my page and I'm like, I can't believe he just died. And my wife's like, what do you mean you're writing the book? I'm like, but that wasn't the plan. It just happened. And it's really cool to see where they come from. And a lot of times the characters, really they drive the stories for me when I'm writing. So they kind of steer the bus, and I'm there and have to do where I want to go. And sometimes we reach the destination how I want it to be, and other times we don't. So this series, a prime example, in Agents of Tomorrow, I had an idea in my head how I wanted the series to end.
Mm-hmm.
And I was adamant this is how it was going to end. And when I ended book 3, it's nothing like I had planned. And so it's kind of exciting too for me to go through that process.
That's awesome. And then your covers are really I love them. They fit your genre and the ideas you've got behind the books very well. Did you have the same person do the covers, or how did your cover process go about?
Yeah. So what I usually do is I'll play around with covers, and I am not a designer in any way, shape, or form, but I'll mess around and get an idea of what I'd like. And then I use two different people for my covers. Earth Has Fallen was done by one group, and then The Agents of Tomorrow was done by a different. But you can see the different style of both of them.
Yeah.
But they're both post-apocalyptic. And my biggest goal is, they say you should never judge a book by its cover, or you don't buy a book based on the cover. But especially with ebooks and everything else, the cover is the first thing. You see the cover, and then it's like, yeah, I'll look at it or I won't. And I learned early on this past year when I started writing that covers are so important. And if I would have known how difficult marketing was, I probably would have never even started writing in the first place. It's the writing's the easy part. The stories are the fun part. Even the editing at this point, it can get tedious, but still the editing is not bad. And I've learned to use editors. The first few things I published, I still going through finding mistakes and rewriting them and republishing them. But marketing and cover design are so important to get the word out.
Yeah.
And the people I've used for the covers, I've been very excited with, very impressed with, and they've been very good to me. And they know what they're doing. So I'd say, here's the concept, here's what I threw together. You run with it, and they'll send me some ideas and say, what do you like? And usually it's a couple-week process to get through what we want to do, and then we're good to rock and roll.
Nice. Yeah, marketing is like the bane of my existence. I despise
you got to be on it. Yeah, you got to be on all the time.
And it's like, I don't know if you use Amazon ads, but I do. And I'm so terrible at staying on top of those and making sure they're still going. Like, I've got to go through and do a whole bunch of those. Yeah. But it's so tedious, I guess is the word I'm looking for there.
Yes, my goal is I try and do 10 ads a week per book. Yeah. And
that's a lot. That's still a lot.
Happen. If I can get 2 ads per book, I'm really excited. What I've been doing now is I've been focusing on Agents of Tomorrow and Earth Has Fallen, and those ones I've been really advertising. And hopefully when people come and look at my page and they see the other books, they're there. Please check them out. But these are the 2 series I'm really proudest of. So those are the ones I've been focusing on. But it's very tedious, it's time consuming, tracking down keywords and targeting and trying to make 2nd generation and 3rd generation ads. So
yeah, it's
someday when we're both rich, we can just let somebody else do that for us.
Yes, seriously, I will in a heartbeat. I hire somebody to do it as soon as I can afford it. Because right now, it's all going into editing and publishing stuff.
Exactly, it comes and it goes.
It does. It's very not cheap. So, but it's totally worth it because I'm one of those. I've always when I first started writing, somebody was like, "Oh, quantity over quality," and I am the complete opposite. I'm like, "No, you want a good quality product to put out there because if it's crap, they're not going to follow you."
Exactly. They're going to read one and be like, "Yeah, well, that was a waste of money. Thank you so much."
Yeah.
People are paying. Even though it may be $1 or $4 or $10 for a paperback, it's hard-earned money.
Mm-hmm,
and especially nowadays with the pandemic, every penny counts. And you want to make sure that people are enjoying what they read. And again, I think it goes back to earlier our conversation. Is that was my whole point when I started writing. Mm-hmm. Is I just want people to be entertained, to enjoy it, to escape reality for a little while, and just be able to have some fun and read and forget about the struggles because we're all going through it. So that's my ultimate hope. Now, don't get me wrong. If I could someday make this a full-time career and just write for a living, it'd be fantastic. I keep emailing Stephen King. I'm like, dude, we're both from Maine, man, and he hasn't responded yet. But eventually, he's gonna get sick of hearing from me. I'm like, just give me a blurb, Stephen. Just read the book and tell me what you think. I'm like, and that's perfect. But
yeah, That
we'll
would
get there
be
eventually.
awesome if you did that. Just throw me a bone here. Let me get some of this from you. Give me some good vibes, energy, so we can get my stuff
Yeah,
out there.
exactly.
So would
Yeah,
you
because
say, sorry, go ahead.
so, yeah, Stephen King. So he's from up in the Bangor area here in Maine. So he's from the same state, and he's actually come to the school I used to teach at. So like I've met him a few times, and most down to earth, nicest person you'd ever meet. But I know for a fact he gets, a million emails every day and a million requests every day. So I'm just kind of trying to slide in now. So like every time I post something, like I'll slide in like hashtag Stephen King,
Yeah, no, that's a great way to get his attention. Would you say you try to like follow some of the steps he's used in his writing to do yours?
Yeah. And actually I read his book on writing, and I've read all of his novels, and I like his style. The Stand was his major post-apocalyptic book, and I just love how he set the world up and kind of sets everything up. And at times it can be a little bit slow.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it's with the first book I wrote, Return from Darkness, which was my first flagship book for post-apocalyptic. I take the first couple chapters and I really build the world out.
Mm-hmm.
And some people love it, and some people are like, that's the worst part of the book. I couldn't start reading until chapter 2. I'm like, and I get it, but I want to make sure there was that foundation of this is what kind of brought us here, and it's not for everybody. And so in the Ages of Tomorrow, I kind of backed off a little bit on that, and I jumped right into the story. So it's a little bit different. I'm curious to see, when people respond and read it, which one they like better, where it falls. But I think world building is so important in anything that you write, especially if it's sci-fi fantasy, because a lot of times we're dealing in worlds that don't even exist yet. So we're recreating worlds, and consistency as you go through the book of what's happening and where things are. And if there's any type of supernatural components or this type of magic or what have you, it's gotta be followed through, because the readers are smart. They read genre, and they will call you out in a heartbeat. Like, well, you said over here, this happened. Now you're saying that. It's like, yeah, you're right.
Yeah. And honestly, I'm with you on the world building thing, because in my own books, I do a lot of it. And I feel like I do more research for the world building than I do for any part of the story. Because there's actually, in the book I've got as my background here, there's one, okay, it's kind of a section, almost like a scene thing set up, and it's in Alaska. And I had to do a lot of research on the area because, I've never been there, but I've had friends that have been there. It's on my bucket list. But I had to recreate the world in a magical perspective. But I also was tying in one of the creatures that's more of like a fantasy legend there. And it's the evil creature in the whole situation. But I was like, I had to tie it in where it was realistic, but not like, hey, this is truth. It's still fiction.
You got to get it right. Definitely, yeah. And that's the same with me. Is like in Agents of Tomorrow, it's set out in Washington State and runs through California down the West Coast into Mexico, and Earth Has Fallen is set out in the Utah area and goes up through Canada. So it's both on the other side of the USA, because I live in Maine. I'm as far east as you can go. Like we're getting like 12 inches of snow tomorrow. We just had a foot last week, and it's like 2 degrees. It's fantastic. I can imagine. I'm like, why do I live here? I complain every winter that it's too cold and every summer that it's too hot. So I don't understand. But researching the geographical locations and just kind of how people interact, and playing with the idea of kindness versus niceness and what's the difference of that, because on the East people are very kind, not very nice, but on the West they're very nice but not very kind. Playing down with those things, and of course West Coast people will be like, we are too, and I'm like, okay, well, that's fine, we'll argue that later. But you want it to be realistic, especially if someone lives in that area. If you're talking about a certain location, they know if it's that location or not. Traveling different places. When I started in Washington, from the prison they're at till getting towards Seattle, I started writing the book, and they were going to Seattle. I was like, so they're heading west. Mm-hmm. And then I went back and started doing a little more research. I'm like, nope, they're heading east. let's go back and fix all this, because if they're heading west, they're never going to get to Seattle.
Yeah.
So things like that, but like you said, researching it because you want it to be believable. Even though it's fantastical and it's not reality, you want it to be believable, because that's that's the escape from reading, right? That lets us get into that other world, other reality, and just kind of be there and let everything else, fly away.
It is so true. So if you could give a piece of advice to a new author, new writer, what would you recommend?
First thing let's say is have thick skin. Don't worry about reviews. Don't worry about what people say. if you're going to write, start off writing because you have a passion and you want to do it, and other people will see that and they'll fall the bandwagon. But you can't please everybody, so don't try. You'll go crazy. When I first started, my first few reviews were great. And I'm like, oh, this is amazing. And then I got like a 3-star review, and I was like, my world's over. And then I talked to a few other my friends that write, and they're like, what are you talking about? They're like, that's a good thing to have multiple people reading, because now it's not just people that love what you write. You have people out there that took a chance, and it spreads you out further. And hire someone to do your marketing. That's the second piece of advice. Hire me, I'll do your marketing for you.
Ugh.
No, that's a joke. I will not do marketing.
I will say, if you want.
We'll talk after the podcast. No. Yeah, but that's the biggest thing. They have thick skin. And also, if you really want to be a writer and do it well, I think a big piece of advice for people is to realize that writing is more than writing. There is the marketing, there is the advertising, there is the cover design. There is going on podcast interviews, really trying to, not just sell your book, but also you sell yourself. It's like anything else in sales, right? People are going to buy your book, but also, they may not like you as much, and they may not buy your book, or vice versa. They may love you and hate your book. Key is getting the book into their hands. Look at whatever platform works for you. Make sure that you like it, whether it's ebooks or paperback or hardcovers. If you want to go Amazon, you want to go wide. Do what's right for you. I think that's a big part too. Is people will try and tell you, oh, you should be on KU only, or you should be going over to Barnes and Noble or Nook, or you should. No, do what's right for you. What feels comfortable. What program feels comfortable. Even when you're writing your books, you want to write it in Microsoft Office, or do you want to use Vellum, or do you want to use something else? That's okay. Or, like I was saying earlier with me, I'll write 90% of my books on my phone because of my family. I'll be sitting in the living room and I'm just typing away on my phone. And that's why the editing process is so important, because if I ever showed anyone some of my first drafts, you guys would die. And I'm an English professor. That's what I do by trade. It's like, ooh, can't show this to anybody. I'm going to lose my job.
And that's the thing, is why it's first draft, guys.
Yes. They call it rough for a reason.
Yes, for real. So now let's go ahead and share with our readers and viewers. We've got a mix going on, because this is going to be shared on YouTube and on various social media, guys. So go ahead and tell them where they can find you and your work.
All right. So right now I'm through Amazon. So Amazon.com. Peter Servidio. Last name's kind of tough, Servidio. But you can find me there. I'm on, trying all these right. I'm on TikTok at Writings by Servidio. I'm on Instagram at Servidio Peter. I'm on Twitter at Servidio Peter. I got a webpage on Wix. It's just Writings by Servidio. We find that there. I got a blog I do there that I've been sporadic on. I gotta get better on doing that. I found TikTok, so I've been having so much fun, doing book talk and posts. It's been amazing. My kids have been helping me. We're messing around. So that's been a lot of fun. Aside from that, Amazon.com is where I have the ebooks. I have the paperbacks. I do a mailing list. And my mailing list, I do once a month. I try not to hit people too much, but like for February, I'm doing a little fun thing contest in February. So I'm going to post a Valentine's Day post at noon on Valentine's Day on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. And you'll get one entry for each one you like and one for each one you comment on. And the winner's going to get Agents of Tomorrow, the series paperback signed by me. I'm going to sign it and give them paperback, send that to them. Plus, they'll be able to choose one other book that I've written, their choice ebook or paperback. So things like that I do are fun. And just trying to, again, get the word out there, get people to read, to enjoy it. My books, they're not overly graphic when it comes to violence. I try and keep it, young adult. So young adults can read the books as well. I know that my teenage daughter loves going through and looking what I have. She's 17. But it's there. I mean, inspired me, of course, by books like The Hunger Games and that. So you can find me there. Or if you're ever in Maine, I live in Lewiston, stop on down. We'll say hello, have some coffee.
Yay. That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Peter, for being on the show today.
I really appreciate you. Thank you for taking the time.